All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Happy holidays. Welcome to the ItCast Real Talk on Sex. I am your host, Nika Sherrell. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that aims to increase diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. Join us this weekend for the Enlightened Consent Summit. You can visit and learn more at enlightenedconsentsummit.com. I will be speaking on Sunday. Please join us. And support the ItCast and all of the work we do by going to the itcast.com and subscribe to this YouTube channel and share with your community. This week's topic is Real Talk on Body Love. Today in the booth, we have Luba Venable. Luba Venable is a coach, trainer, and public speaker. Through her open and vulnerable speaking style, Luba leaves audiences inspired, open to honesty, and interested in new possibilities. Luba, please join us on the show.
Hello. Hi. So excited to be here.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So before we begin, please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to do the show.
Yay. My name is Luba, and you can hear my accent. So originally I'm from Ukraine. I grew up in the post-Soviet Union. I moved to US 6 years ago. I have been in California most of this time. I have my amazing husband. We've been together 6 years, and my little cutie pie 4-year-old son. And you know, like for a while, I've been technical manager, quality assurance engineer. And then like 2 years ago, I had this realization that sex education is such a passion for me that as I realized it, I quit my job and I just went full on taking trainings, leading courses. And here I am on this podcast that is covering my most favorite topic.
Yes. Oh my God. And I love that, like, you're just like, I have to do this. I'm passionate about it. Dive in, because like this world, it needs so many more people who are willing to talk about sex, willing to talk about sexuality. And it's so healing. So like, and we get into this for passion.
Yes. Like, why else would you do this? Because I'm so passionate about it that when I start talking about sexuality, I can't stop.
Yes. Okay. So, all right. So let's start with, what is body love?
What is body love? I have 8 weeks course for women, where it's there is something that when women only gather together, like more openness and feeling more safe, and where we explore the body image, you know, just in general, like what stops us, like why we have these judgments about bodies. And I would go to like room of 60 people, and the question, raise your hand if you ever judged your body, every hand goes up, like every hand. Yes, right. And it's like, it doesn't matter how we look, like every single person, especially women, we judge body. And then what is interesting, that the more we can accept and love body, the more we can enjoy sex. There is correlation. Yeah. And that makes sense, right? Because when I'm self-conscious and then I'm with a partner, right? Like I will be just like, oh my God, like,
can't get out of your head. Like,
yeah, but then like when I accept my body for whatever it is, like, you know, it doesn't matter how I look, when I accept it and I love it. And then when I go in sexual interaction, I am just bringing my body to play.
Oh, yes. And like when you get out of your head and you get out of the things you're holding on to, you can feel what's happening in the body. You can be more connected to it. I get like, yes, those spaces, like for women, they're created very, very safely. Men only spaces are very safe for the male presence. And then there are spaces that are like special for us, whatever sexuality or gender we choose, as long as you connect energetically with them.
Yeah.
On the topic of, sorry. On the
No. But before you go there, I wanted to add that like the body image is just like what people see and like how we present and how we feel about it. But then as well, we go into genitals and like, like really creating that connection, that like given a name, start like talking to her or them, like, or he, like, whatever they identify.
This is
Yeah.
what I was going to share, actually. So I did a Tantra course. I'm in a
Oh.
5-week Tantra series. And this past weekend, we actually got to look at our genitals. Like I had to look at my pussy, like that happened. And the weird part is like, I was judgmental. Like it was an immediate like conversation around that. And I was like, I don't actually judge anyone else's body. Why am I judging my own?
Yeah. And going like right there, like as we talk about genitals, about pussies, like I till certain time I never looked at my pussy, but then somehow I thought that she looks terrible. So when partner goes down on me, I'm like, oh my God, they're seeing that, and like, how can I enjoy sex when I'm like so ashamed of how my pussy looks, right? And then doing all this work, I remember just like taking pictures for my lover, and I see how my labia minora very long, and I've been so subconscious about that because it's called labia minora, it has to be small lips, and then labia majora is bigger, right?
Right. So they say.
Yeah. But my labia minora is so big that I noticed it looks like bunny ears, and I started calling her Miss Bunny. That how about instead of judging that, I just adore that. And so now I know her as Miss Bunny. And so, my husband calls her that. And like, here we are.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, I have to talk to it a lot more often. Hi.
Yeah. Let's take a moment and connect to our genitals, everybody.
Yes. Yeah, I'll have to hear from her what her name is, or them, they, all that. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah, that's incredibly important. And I think about like it's not just our like genitals, and that is hugely important, but it's like the whole experience of the body. Like I don't care actually, but the concept of like being overweight, the concept of oh God, there's so many. I'm not even going to go into that whole list, but like there's so many ways in which we can judge ourselves and keep ourselves from really tapping into the experience, like to be able to relate to someone. So yeah, I think this is huge. This is huge.
Yeah. And as you're talking about this, that like one of the exercises we do in the course, in the body love course, that like thinking of a body part that I don't like, some like the body part that I like the least, like I don't like, and what is the story? Because we are not born with this idea that like, oh, I don't like. For me, my breasts are small. And that has been, like for a while, like most of my life, just like feeling so self-conscious. And when I look in my past, like, oh, my mom started, as I get my puberty, my mom started commenting, oh, so bad you didn't inherit my breasts because her boobs are big, oh, so bad and then I go more, and like my guy friends will be like, oh, that woman is so hot, she has big boobs, and I'm like, oh, and I'm not hot, like something wrong with me, but then like just finding that and trying to dissociate that, like, oh, what if that story is a bullshit, just to give it like, what if it's a bullshit, and what if my breasts, like the size they are, they just great. And so I went through this experience that I got pregnant, and my breasts grew in size. And when I was breastfeeding, they look like implants. And I went through this whole like, oh my God, I love them. And then my baby, the moment my baby sees me naked, she just like, oh, like he wanted it so much. And so I went through that experience. Now they're back. Like I'm not breastfeeding anymore. They're small again. But something shifted. So I'm going through that experience, I love them. And now I feel them more. My nipples are more sensitive because I don't neglect them. I love them. And if someone doesn't enjoy them, they can, go away.
Yep.
These are my breasts and I love them.
Yes, I love that. And then what I'm hearing is like you went through this space of like not feeling not being good enough. And then you had the experience with your breasts that allowed you to connect with them, to feel them and like their energy. And now you have a relationship with that part of your body. I love that. That's real.
Yes, it is.
I have to share. So I had that experience with my hair, actually. Like, and that's one of the areas where I'm like, is that like, that's a part of the body. It's a part of the body. It's one of the first things that people notice and recognize about you. So growing up as a child, I was often told, like, I would always get this story of like, oh, they have good hair. But I never got that conversation about myself. And I was always around people who were like changing themselves to look this particular way. And I did that too. And then at a certain point, I was like, I'm going to have my natural hair. I'm going to actually experience what my natural hair is like. And I didn't get to learn that until I was like 13. And it was really beautiful. I went through locks. I went through having a fro. It was adorable. And now the really funny part is like I shaved my head and I was like, this is the best thing ever. I love my hair. I love it when someone like rubs my head when it's shaved. And I'm like, oh my God, like, and it's not even like, I love the texture of it. I'm like, maybe I'll grow it out. Maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. But it's a one day at a time relationship. And I now get to appreciate that part of my body.
Oh my God, yes. And as you're talking about your hair, like your head, I feel like I want to reach out, I want to touch, and it's and it's area for kisses. Like you have more area where you feel kisses, right? It's just
I'm getting
like
my scalp kissed.
Yes. I bet it will feel amazing for receiver and for the giver.
Oh, yes. Okay, done. Oh. So, okay, so talking about this, like the parts we don't connect with, one of the things we brought up was like worshiping, like that whole conversation. And I'm curious to see, like, God, there's so many angles on this. I would love for you to share a little bit about like what that makes available.
So that like when you talk about worshiping, I go immediately into worshiping genitals because because as we are growing up, like we learn these cheeks, nose, forehead, chin. Somehow we ignore breasts. Yeah, ears are fine, but then like no name in breasts, no name in genitals, right? Like just, oh, don't look, don't name, it's down there.
Okay, so I had sex education as a kid, and there were good touches and bad touches, and there were good parts and bad parts.
Oh my God, it even goes in the bed. See, I haven't heard about that, but it's ingrained, right? So it becomes like neglected, something negative. So, and again, like, but it's area that has so much pleasure, right? But then there is a challenge to feel that pleasure because we learned to neglect it and to know it as bad or something negative. So now to like what I mentioned, like coming up with name and talking, but how about like bringing that part, like the pussy or cock, bringing on a pedestal, and like really worshiping. Because in Indian, some religions, I think it's Hindu, when you go to ashram, there is a statue of genitals, of like Shiva Lingam, that there is a big like penis and there are flowers around and they're worshiping the part of the body, which is like so powerful and amazing, right? Yeah. And so, and this, in the course that I teach, sexuality and spirituality, I have the whole visualization of like seeing the genitals and like worshiping, just really like how we do it in churches, right? Like getting on your knees, like really having tears of like how beautiful this is. Yeah. And then realizing that I have it in my body. And we can do it to our partners, like to just worship the genitals. And then
I love that. That's so real. And like, there's often in the realm of religion and spirituality this disconnect from sexuality, all in all. And when we did the Global Sexual Health and Freedom Summit about a month or so, we had someone speaking about like religious trauma and where sexuality shows up in the Bible. And it was amazing. We went over like where they talked about oral sex, where they talked about worshiping the genitals, where it was like this is an okay part of our being, but it doesn't get highlighted.
Yeah. That's interesting, and depending which religion, because in
Right.
Christianity, for example, it's just like anything genitals, anything like sexual related doesn't exist. It's
Yeah. And
just
that
like
was the
only make babies.
Yep. and
Yeah.
like talking about in Hindu and like that whole conversation, there are cultures all around the world who worship genitals and stack sculptures of genitals and all that conversation. And it does something, like it actually is doing something for me right now to even think about like what's it like to worship the parts of myself, my body that have these
Yeah.
negative stories.
Yeah. And as we're talking, I'm thinking of this, that like there are times when I interact with my partner, and then so my partner has penis, and there is this time of like, okay, I want to spend time with his penis. And then I get into this like the worshiping aspect, that I will look for some time. I just really like, to just be grateful that I can be in the presence of this powerful organ, like it can create a baby. And then just like to kiss it gently, to just hold in my arms and feel like, this like the energy, the tickling, to the point that I will have tears, and like when I have the time, like the time flies, like I can spend 1 hour, and then I hear from my partner that was like the best blowjob ever. because because it makes sense, right?
Yeah. Well, like, and you're connected energetically, the whole conversation about worshiping, like, I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And like I don't have to go to church, I can do it at home.
Oh, I totally forgot what I was about to say, but that was amazing.
A good sign. That means that we are going so deep.
Right. You said best blowjob ever, and I was like, there you go.
And then like while you're like thinking of the question, that like I was in a workshop where it was women, and that like at some point we created a circle, and every woman was showing her pussy, her yoni, her like
Yeah.
vulva.
Yeah.
And like just there was this like the moment of honoring, that I go around the circle and I stop at every pussy and I bow her and I look at her and I admire her beauty. I noticed they're so different, and each of them so unique, so beautiful. It's like pieces of art. And then I noticed you can't tell age. Like the pussy doesn't age. Like on genitals, like women were all ages. Like you can't tell age unless there is hair and you see the hair is gray, right? But
Right.
like the tissue, it doesn't age. How amazing it is.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. What I remembered earlier is like some of the best sex I've ever had is when I'm being grateful. Like I'm being grateful for my partner. I'm being grateful for the moment, the experience, just like all this gratitude. I'm like that. Like that's what I hear in that space of worshiping. It's like to be grateful to have these parts, to have this moment, this experience, and this connection with someone.
Oh, exactly. Yes. So that sex is not rubbing genitals. Like
Right.
that's just an okay sex. That's like casual, right? Like
Let's talk about rubbing genitals.
what exactly would you like to talk about?
Okay, so you said it's like, it's not necessarily the best sex, it's just kind of like, hey, let's come together, do our thing, depart. And that could even be in relationships. Like it's not just about whether you meet someone one time or you're in a marriage where it's just like, all right, we're doing the thing now. Like this is a chore. And so one of the things we talked about was like not being ready and kind of like how to improve that actual experience around sexuality and that part. So
yeah. That that no one taught me, like for most of my life, I didn't realize difference between sex and intimacy. I thought it's the same. And a lot of people, even today, I hear that like intimacy is considered sex. And so I would go have sex with someone and thinking that I will get intimacy, but it's not necessarily coming with sex, right? And now just like learning to separate the two, that I can be intimate with someone, just like when I can be my true self, just so open, I can be in tears, like just very raw, very vulnerable. I feel like I'm being intimate with you right now. And it's like, it doesn't have to be sexual, like there is no aspect of sexuality. But then when we bring sex and intimacy, when they bring them together, it can be very juicy and very connecting. And so a lot of times, as I being a woman, as I work with women a lot, that it takes longer, not for everyone, but for a lot of women, it takes longer to warm up, to have like, to feel turned on, to feel hungry, to like, to have something go inside. And a lot of times we are not waiting, like we are not getting to that point, and we have dildo, penis, fingers, anything inside too soon, just too soon. And this is how like vagina, because our bodies are very smart, vagina learns to numb, because not to feel pain, it's very smart to numb. And then like, when that happens, it's just, I can handle it.
Right. And then it's like, well, why can't I come? Because my vagina is numb and like not.
Yes.
And it's like, with vibrators, with anything, it can happen. So
exactly. Yeah. And this is the work that, like for people who want to awaken their vaginas and to just, to bring sensitivity, it's very important to again to just like arrive into, okay, like maybe some emotions are stored there, right? Like, and like trauma can be stored there, to just have that connection that I'm not going to expose you, like my vagina, my vulva, to anything before you're ready.
Yeah.
Like the ground rule for satisfied sex, like not spreading your legs unless you're really ready, and just like to have that, to promise it to her, and then like to keep on that promise, and like that to wait. For me, it takes 40 minutes, and in the past I felt like, oh, maybe I'm not like sexual or something wrong with me. Today I know that this is like, it takes for me, and my partner has to know that, and like just I need like some warm up and this like foreplay before I feel that like my Miss Bunny, my pussy is just so hungry that she can't wait, and then I allow things to go inside her. So yeah, that's one aspect. And another aspect, exercising with yoni egg, PC muscle exercises, that like this is the muscle that when we go to gym or we walk, it doesn't get to be exercised, so it becomes atrophy over time. So just to bring some like time and exercise, and especially exercising before sex, like before something goes inside, that all the blood goes there, like the sensation, and then it feels like so much.
Yeah. And to, expand on that, the PC muscles, like the pelvic floor, it's great for things going in, it's great for things coming out. And for anybody who doesn't know how to activate that, like that's literally like hold your pee, whether you have to pee or not, just kind of hold it and just flex the muscles. It's a great practice. It is a great practice.
It is. Yep.
One of the other things you said is like not feeling like you're sexual because you're not fully aroused. I know a lot of people who like and this is no like knock on people who are asexual, but I know a lot of people who like have like are that, and then they discover like what works for them. And I think that's really beautiful actually, because it's like, I don't want too much too fast, but that doesn't mean that like that you could never come around to understanding your body and what works, and maybe nothing works.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing, the vagina is like the penis. Like unless it's hard, it's not going to go in. And unless the vagina is like aroused and ready and wet, it should not necessarily be penetrated. So
exactly, yeah, and it's easy because like when penis is not erect, just not hard, right? Can't
right.
go inside. But then with vagina, when she's not erect, like we put sins there because like physically we can do it, and that's not fair. Like let's
Right.
not do it, people.
Right. Yes. And yes, the vagina gets erect.
Yeah. And how you say that, like not feeling sexual, like there are scenes to look at that. I look at it, there is like feeling like turned on for sex. It correlates with feeling turned on for life. You know that, right? So when I'm not feeling sexual, it's a barometer. It helps me to look like, hey, what is going on in your life? And then I see, oh, I have been stressed. Like for the last like 3 weeks, I'm so stressed. Like, and then I just pause and look at what has to change, like what is happening, what am I doing to myself? Or with my partner, like something like there is like a wall between us, like the intimacy gone somewhere, like I start resisting my partner. So there is like being like turned on. It actually tells us, like, because when I am relaxed, happy in a loving relationship, most likely I will feel, just erotic and turned on.
Well, and like there's that concept of like, when you get into a relationship, all of a sudden everybody wants you. And it's like, well, like you're feeling yourself and you're good in your, and so then you become lit up and full of life and expressive and all these things. And so that makes perfect sense. And it doesn't have to be inside of a relationship, but yeah, sexuality is tied to life experience. Um,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got in the tantra course, I got this reading where we like did this exercise, and we connected with our genitals in this way that was oh it was like understanding for me specifically that like my sexuality is deeply tied with my success in life. And like,
Oh.
yeah,
Oh.
it was such an interesting thing. And it's like when I'm not allowing myself to like flow sexually, my success is stagnated. It's like, and I got that recently. I was like, oh, this is why things are starting to like move up and look great, because I am having a different relationship with my sexuality.
Oh my God, I can so relate to that. Yes, 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 yes. And a lot of times, like how people like making decisions in life, like we can be in the brain and try to be logical, or we can like people listen to heart or listen to your gut. A lot of times I listen to my pussy, like she's being this GPS, and she can like when I'm like
People listening cannot see
I
my
see,
face
I
right
see
now,
it's landing on Yonika. that like just like like, do I want to accept that offer? Do I like this person? Not even for sexual, like as a friend. Like, do I want to buy this chocolate? Like when she's like tingling and I feel she's awake, like yes, go for it. Like there is like awakening that part. It just helps to find the right things in life.
Yes, I love that. I love that. So we talked about trauma, and like there's a lot in terms of like healing and moving through those spaces, so that this type of thing can happen. Are there ways that you actually work with the trauma and like
Oh yeah, so it it depends, like there are different levels of trauma, right? And a lot of times like people might be thinking, oh, I have this deep trauma, but then when we are working, it can be resolved very, like it's like on the surface, it just like some meditation, some just tapping in, it can be resolved.
Mhm.
So when when I identify that there is a trauma that needs therapy, then I send person for the therapy, and I have tools to identify it. But a lot of times, like we have this class of healing sexual past, and something that we had our first sex experience, how we heard about sex, our previous partner, those experiences affect how we feel about sexuality today. And just having visualization and like letting them go, for a lot of people that can be it, that's enough to move forward. As well, again, like connecting, as we do this meditations, visualizations, connection with your genitals, like emotions popping up, and like a lot of memories stored in our just touching, opening of vagina can bring so much, and then we process them, and it's a beautiful healing process.
I just got, when you said like touching your vagina, it's like touching with love, not with like arousal, or like, because we can be sexual and not intimate with ourselves. And that's something that like I don't think people are present to. So like touching it from a place of love and intimacy and like care versus
that. And then when we touch with love and care and something is stored there, it feels safe to be released, like to
wow.
add to this, like majority of women have clitoral orgasm only, and then vaginal, like before you get to orgasm, like the G-spot or like any vaginal orgasm, like those whatever is stored there has to be released first, to create the safety that then vagina can orgasm after she released everything she's carrying there,
And more deeply, possibly more frequently.
Yeah. And I had this experience like when my inside, like my vagina was touched in this like very safe environment with my husband. We were doing a tantra exercise, and I have been speaking English like every day, and even I see dreams in English. I switched from like Russian to English, but then something came up that I started screaming in Russian. How fascinating is that?
Wow.
That's something from the times when I lived in my body with Russian language, and that came up, and like, wow. That's amazing how everything is, related.
Yeah. Can I ask, like, what was your experience with sexuality growing up in Russia?
So how they say that in Soviet, I was till 6 years old, I lived in Soviet Union, and sex didn't exist in Soviet Union, like literally. Like my friends of my mom would proudly say that my husband never seen me naked, and they have 3 kids, So somehow they created kids, but that the whole sexual aspect wasn't there. And so I kept my virginity till I turned like 22 years old. I was just like holding it, keeping it for the right person. And then like when I met the right person, like our first experience was just terrible, because it was like we didn't know how to do it. Like it's already till 22 years old, like so many stories like stored there, and then I ended up marrying that person, and like I didn't want to have sex. Like every time like he would approach me, I didn't want it, but I would go for it as a good wife.
Right.
And so I never been raped, but every time when people talk about rape, I have tears and emotions, because I feel like I agreed to be raped in a way, like I had consent, but it wasn't what my body wanted.
Right.
And that type of experience, when I talk to my mom, she's like, oh, my experience is similar. So it's like, sex doesn't exist, but then it's like somehow hidden and it's all awkward.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely real. And one of the things about consent is like we have to acknowledge other people's boundaries, but we also have to acknowledge our own.
Yeah.
And I am a firm believer that we have not finished fully defining what rape is. Like, there's this concept of assault rape, there's this concept of date rape, and then there's this concept of marital rape. And we don't talk about all of those different elements of it, like what would take away someone's consent without verbal communication. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, as a partner, if you see your partner's not exactly like enthused, perhaps that's a sign to stop and check in.
Yeah, definitely. And like communication is such a lubrication, right? To talk about the sins, because there is another aspect that I have part of me that it's very hot when someone crosses my boundaries, but I have to be in that play, like I don't want someone to come and cross my boundaries. Like I want my partner that you playful, and like I'm like, oh no, but then he crosses, right? And it's very hot for me, but it has to be in a safe environment.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
about agreement. It's like you can
Mm-hmm.
do anything you want to with agreement, as long as both parties, or sorry, all parties, not just two.
All parties, everyone who participates, yes.
Are informed and in agreement, and then there's no end to what can happen there. But that's important, that communication element.
Yeah, and Nika, you touched on boundaries. That's the whole different topic, which is just so gentle, because for a lot of people it's difficult to set a boundary.
Mhm.
So when I work with women, it's like they don't want to look sexy, because when you go out there and you look sexy, and then like you have to set a boundary when people approach you, right? So it's so much easier to like not look sexy, to kind of like cover yourself. And it's like, that sucks, right? Like, what if I want to go through the world with my feeling like the sexuality flowing out of me, and when people approach me, to just like be confident, saying like, oh no thank you, yes you have good taste, but no thank you.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you, I'm honored, and no.
Yeah, and it requires work to be able to set those boundaries, because like we are afraid to hurt a person, or it's like, oof, it's too much.
Or to like make it awkward. Like there's a lot. There's a lot. And when you let that like one boundary slide, it's a slippery slope, like whatever the boundary is. Yeah. So okay, so I'm on the conversation around allowing yourself to be loved, like allowing yourself to orgasm, allowing yourself to be in that communication, and like your genitals are communicating with each other, just like you would communicate verbally with someone else.
Yeah, and to have partners who support you in that if partner doesn't hear your boundaries,
Mhm.
or like not being respectful, just send them their way. Like
Right.
there are people who very like who are honoring, like who when they hear boundary, they just like they're so grateful, thank you for speaking. And like if you don't have that person in your life, they out there, like.
Yeah. And can I just say, that is the appropriate response when someone sets a boundary. Like,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that, I got it. And allow it to land. You're right, boundaries is a whole other conversation, and I can tell, I'm like, do we have to go there? Yes, we do.
Because it can be the whole class on boundaries. Like there are
Yes.
so many aspects of like that, how we can say it harshly because we are triggered, but if you say it soon in the process, we can say it lovingly.
Right.
you
Right.
know like my 4-year-old this morning, he told me, get out of here. And this is his boundary, but it hurts, right? Like I'm like, okay, I have to teach him how he could say it nicer. And a lot
Right.
of people, they like 30, 40, 50, whatever age, and they still say it in a harsh way. And
Right.
then it hurts. So it's like the both sides, like there is work to be done with boundaries.
Absolutely. And one of the things you brought up with speaking of your son is that, like when a child wants to set boundaries and you don't allow them to, it takes away their agency. And that kind of thing will last into adulthood. Like, I don't have the right to say no. I don't have the right to
Mm.
choose. I don't have the right to be heard. What I think doesn't matter. And so that perpetuates those cycles where if you don't have agency and autonomy, you can't actually consent to anything.
Yeah. And a lot of times as adults, we have to learn it.
Yep.
Right? How cool that would be to learn it when you're a child. And I grew up not knowing that boundaries exist. Like I learned about boundaries when I was 30. I lived my life through not knowing about boundaries. And then someone will say, like, oh, can I give you a massage? And I'm like, yes. And then they accidentally touch my genitals. And I
Mm,
freeze because I don't know what to do. Like, am I making it up? Like, do I just stand up and run away? Like, what do I do? If I only knew about boundaries at that time.
right. And like in those scenarios, boundaries are hard, fast, or non-existent. And when you start to develop them, for me, it was like anytime somebody crossed my boundary, it was like guillotine. Like, I didn't have boundaries before. Now I have all the boundaries possible. And as you work on that, like it softens, it lightens up, the heart melts a little bit, and you're like, okay, I can just, I don't have to use a brick wall or a chopping block. I can build a fence.
Mm-hmm.
Trees can grow through
Yeah.
that fence,
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
talk through
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
fence.
Yeah. And now as you're talking, like we a lot of times we assume that people have to know that, like, if someone crosses my boundary, they're an asshole. But
Mhm.
what if they just, like, boundaries are different for someone? Like I asked my husband when we started dating his boundaries, he said face. He doesn't like his face touched. Like I would never thought about it. Like I touch face like the first scene, I love touching faces and I love my face to be touched. So it just, we're all different, and it's our work, it's our job to tell boundaries to
Right.
people as early as possible and
Yeah.
in a loving way.
Yes. And it's so easy to like end up in a place where we expect people to assume or know what our boundaries are. And like,
Yeah.
we don't know what our boundaries are often. Like when we're doing that, it's like, well, you should know. I should know what? That you're upset? I hear that.
Yeah, like no one wants that to be done to themselves, and then like you will be surprised what people want to be done to them. Like we are all different, right? Like we have different fantasies, desires, boundaries. Yeah.
And our bodies are all different. They're all
Mm-hmm.
different.
Sensitivity different. Yeah.
Okay, so we're in the holiday season. The holidays, the festivities are happening. And one of the questions I'm asking all the guests is, what do you want for Christmas?
Mm. So when I'm thinking of materialistic stuff, I would love a flogger. I'm realizing that like I love playing with kink, and I don't like, I have other scenes, but I don't have flogger.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh my God, like I want a flogger.
Yes.
And with flogger, it's like there are floggers that it feels this like that intensity of like, oh, I'm whipping someone, but it's not painful for them because it's
Mhm.
like the whole how it's built, right?
Right. And like everybody's body is different. So, like, one of the things I've experienced with floggers, and they're all very different. Some sting, some tickle, some have impact. Like, there's all these different things, and your body will tell you what you like. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And so this is the materialistic, but then I have this, I know that Santa is a very powerful being and can do anything. And so I have a dream that one day I would love to speak like this, to talk about sexuality with Brene Brown and Oprah Winfrey. I see them as a very powerful women out there, and they touch some bold topics. I never heard them touching on sexuality. And I am looking forward to those days when they do talk about sexuality, and I want to be part of that conversation.
Yes. I have to tag on there, Ellen, which is, I mean, like, why are we not talking more in that context? And then, and there are so many others, but I have to say, like, that's part of what we're doing here. Like, I want this conversation to be global and to heal the world and the planet. And we need people who are already in that conversation to actually get that this is also a worthy and necessary conversation that people are not having. Are not having.
Yeah. And I want like to step a little bit further in, like, there is a lot of shame, right? Like, that's the reason why we don't talk about sex. And like, when I started putting myself out there and, like, teaching about it, like, so many layers of shame. Like, I will teach a class and talk about, like, my first sex experience, and then I drive home and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Am I okay? And it's just like, I believe that when we talk about sexuality openly, like with children, with grandparents, with parents, with like literally everyone, like the rape will disappear, the this like pedophilia, like any type of molesting, like, because when it's not hidden, that it's like, oh, it's so charged, but it's out there and you have tools to enjoy it with consent, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to take it a step further, the conversations around like human trafficking wouldn't be happening, gender-based violence, these conversations where people are committing suicide because of their sexuality in certain countries, certain geographical locations. It's not safe. The levels of harassment, like, it's so important to get this conversation out there because it really does save lives. If we don't think people are out there dying every day over sexuality, whether it's their own or someone else's, we're not paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. And so I want to be alive, like, when that will happen. And it's amazing that there are people like you who are out there, that it's like, it's not a lonely feeling anymore. Like, there are many of us, like, not super many, but there are people who already bring in the conversation. And then, like, the next step, what if we are not blocked on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, right? Like, when I mention pussy, I get blocked. Like, what the hell?
For the record, y'all, this episode might not make it to Facebook because we said a lot of pussy in it. So and that happens. The censorship around sexuality is so intense. And it's like, well, they don't censor violence or guns that much, or alcohol or cigarettes, racism. But when it comes to sexuality, shut it down.
Yeah. And like, I recorded video. I'm so proud that my son knows penis and testicles and butt. And so we recorded video where he's naming his parts, and I put it on social media. It got removed immediately because, again, there is this fear that, like, oh, like, the minor involved in sexual conversation. But I believe that if we let stuff like this just to normalize it, then it will help to not to be afraid of the topic.
Right. And we won't have good touches and bad touches and good parts and bad parts. We'll have an understanding of our body and we'll be able to grow into it versus, I mean, there's so much that happens when kids aren't informed, from molestation and rape to childhood sex play, which there's nothing wrong with that. But when we actually aren't teaching our kids what that is and what it means, then it's more likely. So
yeah. So, like, let's hope for that. Like, let's hold the vision. Yes.
In my lifetime.
Yes.
The best thing to want for Christmas. Yes.
Yes. And you know what? That might help to stop wars too. When people have more sex, more fun, more satisfied, like good quality sex, like enjoy themselves, love their bodies, there is no reason to kill each other.
That is, yeah, that's real. Oh, okay. So you have a class coming up, Sexuality and Spirituality. Would you
Yes.
please share about that?
Yes. So I have on Tuesday, December 14th, there is free intro, which is 1 hour and a half, and we give a taste of what it is. So I am co-leading it with Peter Rangel, who is like 30 years facilitator at Human Awareness Institute. And Peter lived in Osho ashram and traveled to India, and like, you know, deeply spiritual person and deeply sexual person. And that's what we are doing in this class, that like we put them together, that like what if like when we talk like, oh, I'm meditating, you know, like I go to church, I'm spiritual person, it's okay, right? Like you can talk about it. What if I start saying, oh, I'm sexual person, that like when people ask how are you doing, instead of fine, I say I had great sex this morning, you know, or like, oh, I just self-pleasured, you know, I had 3 orgasms. And then somehow it's separate, like you either spiritual and then like there is celibacy, like that route, or if you're sexual, then it's like, oh, you are dirty. So we bring it together, that like, and people in this environment get to decide for themselves. Like we're not telling what is the right scene. We bring exercises and topics to like for people to be in this laboratory and decide for themselves, like what is spirituality, sexuality in my life, and how they connected, and what is spiritual sex and stuff like that.
Right? That part. Oh, you know what's great? You said meditation earlier. We talked about spirituality, and my first thought was, I have a guide that will soon become an audio recording of how to have an orgasm completely without touch. It's a meditation practice, and it's really phenomenal. And so like that is sexual spirituality. It's like you like to get into the body, to connect with that, to connect with source and all the things. And it's completely possible. Yeah.
Yeah, because we are magical beings, you know, there is so much possible that we haven't even touched.
Yeah. And then I was raised Christian, and I did not finish my Bible. But someone recently pointed out all these amazing scriptures of like where sexuality is in the Bible, how it's honored, where it falls. There was even this quote in the Book of Solomon, which was literally about oral sex. And I was like, I had no idea. I should have that one on cue, ready to share anytime, because it was like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't highlight that. They don't talk about it as okay and like honorable and respectable to have good sex. They talk about other things in the Bible, but not that.
Yeah. And you know, I was reading a very deep spiritual book, and I enjoyed it a lot, till the section they mentioned sexuality as like sex addiction, that how like we can go in addictions, and they list different addictions, you know, like drugs, this and that, and sex. And I was like, okay, it might be an addiction, but what if it's not? Like, why you don't talk about how sex can be so healthy and so connecting and a path to God, if you will?
Yes. And like, and that's one of those things where it's like, can we really be addicted to something we need to survive? Like you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and sex is one of the base needs as humanity. Like it's literally a need. So when we talk about like food addiction, and like that's kind of like saying water addiction or air addiction, like yes, we can use these things to like fill needs in ourselves, but also like we shouldn't put that stigma on it, because these are things we need to survive.
Yes. Oh, wisdom. Such a, I'm just, oh, as you're speaking, my whole body is just like, yes.
This is intimacy, y'all.
Yes. And we are miles away from each other.
Exactly. Oh, awesome.
Oh.
Luba, is there anything you'd like to share before we wrap up today?
Mm. It just, like this, the invitation that like to um to look at sex as something just so positive and innocent and beautiful. And just like talking about it and like gifting a vibrator for your sister, brother, or mom. I gifted last Christmas vibrator to my mom. Just like asking the friend how they're doing with sexuality, just normalizing it. Like if I talk about sexuality, it doesn't mean I will have sex with that person, right? Just like let's bring, like, let's not be ashamed of it. Let's bring it out there. It's beautiful. Sexuality is just can be so beautiful and so amazing.
Yes, yes. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This is the It Cast, Real Talk on Sex, our community outreach podcast that aims to increase diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. We're creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. On that last note, if you do want to give a vibrator for Christmas, you can head over to our store, triggerhappytoy.com, where you can get all the things you need. Support the ItCast and all of the work we do by visiting theitcast.com. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and share with your community. We will be back next year. Oh, no, next week.
Bye-bye. Thank you for the great conversation.
Thank you.